The infuriating COVID inquiry. Infuriating. Patrick Vallance yesterday, Chris Witty today. What are they saying and what might it mean for us in the future? Don't go anywhere.
Who is it?
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:30 on Tuesday, November the 21st. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Bamboozled by the science. That's how the government's former chief scientific advisor, Patrick Vallance, described Boris Johnson at the COVID inquiry. This morning, England's chief medical officer, Professor Chris Witty, takes centre stage. Our national reporter, Pip Thompson, has the latest.
England's chief medical officer has also been dubbed England's geek-in-chief. We'll be talking to the inquiry very shortly. It's his second appearance, and what we know so far is that him and Sir Patrick Vallance had very different opinions on lockdown. I'll be bringing you the latest. He's here in a few moments.
Tax-cutting Tories. Just 24 hours now till the autumn statement. Tax cuts are definitely coming. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, is at Downing Street.
The Age are arriving behind me in 11 Downing Street, but what will Jeremy Hunt do when he unveils the autumn statement tomorrow? We'll be finding out shortly on GB News.
And stop the boats spat. There's a row brewing in the government over Rishi Sunak's plan to tackle migration. Our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, joins us from Westminster.
Yes, the Prime Minister's plan to get the Rwanda flights off the ground has hit yet another snag, with cabinet ministers poised to revolt. Is it now just too late for the beleaguered Prime Minister to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat?
And berated over Brexit last night, and I'm a celebrity. First date star Fred Syriacs challenged Nigel Farage over Britain leaving the EU.
The thing is the intolerance that came because Brexit was about immigration. And I remember your poster, which I thought it was shameful what you did, Nigel. But it was about demonising migrants.
And saying that was wrong.
No, it wasn't. Maybe in your view it was, but it wasn't.
But it's not only just my view.
It's a great debate. I love the way that Fred just set it out like that. And maybe Nigel was a bit stitched up in the edit. Because
we never know. It's not live.
We've heard him defend Brexit much stronger than that. And of course, Ant and Dec, we're at it again. Thanks, guys.
Kick it off with Nigel's take on Boris Johnson.
Oh, evening, former Prime Minister.
You what? He's not going to be watching.
Why not?
Well, he's got a new show on GBNews, hasn't he?
Has he? Has he now? All their viewers are going to be well excited.
Hi, Keith.
Hi, Linda.
It's an old joke, but it works very well, and we think it's very funny. And of course, Keith and Linda, text us, email us, come on and talk to us. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, yesterday, all of our emails were from people called Keith and Linda, so keep it coming today. We also welcome anybody else. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Good morning, it's 9:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The leader of the Hamas terror group says a deal for what he calls a truce with Israel is close to being agreed. The group's leader, who is based in Qatar, released a statement in the last few hours, raising hopes of a pause in the fighting. Negotiations are said to be centering on how long the truce may last and details of a prison exchange that could see the release of Israeli hostages. Israel has not yet commented on the reports. However, US President Joe Biden says a deal is close. The government's most senior medical advisor during the pandemic is due to give evidence at the COVID inquiry later. Chief Medical Officer Professor Chris Witty was a leading figure in the government's response to the virus, often appearing in press conferences. The inquiry has already heard that he privately referred to Rishi Sunak's plan to revive the hospitality sector as "eat out to help the virus out." So Chris's highly anticipated appearance comes a day after former Chief Scientific Advisor Sir Patrick Vallance claimed Boris Johnson was bamboozled by COVID data. School holidays in Wales may be shortened under proposals forward by the government. Welsh Education Minister Jeremy Miles says the long summer break can be a strain on families, with disadvantaged students suffering from a loss of learning. A consultation opens today on altering the term calendar. It could see the summer holidays shortened, with the addition of a 2-week autumn break. The NHHT union says it's bewildered by the plan and that no evidence has been presented to show how it would benefit young people. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning.
Morning to you. Sir Patrick Vallance, remember him? Centre stage, wasn't he, during the COVID pandemic? The former chief scientific advisor. He was at the COVID inquiry yesterday. He said Rishi Sunak did not consult scientists about the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, and he didn't have many kind words for Boris Johnson either. Let's have a listen.
Well, we didn't see it before it was announced. I think others in the Cabinet Office have also said they didn't see it before it was formulated as a policy. So we weren't involved in the run-up to it. So I think it would have been very obvious to anyone that this was likely to cause inevitably would cause an increase in transmission risk. And I think that would have been known by ministers. Well, I think I'm right in saying that the Prime Minister at the time gave up science when he was 15. And I think he'd be the first to admit it wasn't his forte and that he did struggle with some of the concepts and we did need to repeat them often. Certainly when I left a meeting, I would usually be persuaded that we had got him to understand what it was we were trying to say. That 6 hours later, he might not have remembered what was in that presentation. So I do not think that there was necessarily a unique inability to grasp some of these concepts with the Prime Minister at the time, but it was hard work sometimes to try and make sure that he had understood what a particular graph or piece of data was saying.
Boris Johnson has a degree in classics from Oxford. He's got a brain the size of a planet. He's got a huge intellect. I'm hopeless with science, absolutely hopeless. But I think the problem with Boris has always been attention to detail.
But that's sort of irrelevant, because what you've got to work out is risk assessment.
Yeah.
OK, and we've got Patrick Vallance there, who's talking about the only thing that mattered was stopping the transmission of a virus. And what's shockingly missing from this COVID inquiry is any sort of interrogation of the concept of lockdown itself.
Yeah, and we know, we'll get more about that today from Chris Witty, that Witty wanted it to go into lockdown much later because he considered the impact on people's mental health,
quite
schools,
rightly too. Yeah,
which there wasn't enough consideration of, and as you know, Bev, until recently, they weren't even going to talk about kids.
Absolutely.
The impact on the COVID inquiry. So the two Ronnies, if you like, who were on TV every night, fundamentally disagreed.
And I think that's OK.
Yeah.
Like, you need people from both sides of the discussion.
Well, I'd have been with Witty.
I'd have been with
slowing down.
I'd have slowing down the. You mean slowing down the lockdowns?
Yeah.
Absolutely, but it's all based on a fallacy that COVID-19 as a virus was more dangerous than it actually was. October 2019 to May 2020, there was 37,000 excess deaths, and only 0.4% of those were COVID deaths listed as COVID as the only cause. And I really have to defend Rishi Sunak this morning, and I really have to defend Boris Johnson as well on this debate, because when Rishi Sunak is being accused of wanting people to die, that's not what he was doing. He was urging caution on an overreaction to a virus that was predominantly more lethal, perhaps, to the elderly, with an average age of death of 82 and 83.
And he was speaking from the point of view as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, whose job is managing the economy.
Yeah.
And he would have known the traumatic impact on the economy, which, frankly, we're still paying for now.
Another part of the inquiry, actually, quite right, Andrew, that caught my eye was when Patrick Vallance was asked about his time spent working at GlaxoSmithKline. So have a listen to this.
And then in 2006, your career took another turn, and you spent from 2006 to 2018 working for GlaxoSmithKline. Yes, I was global president of research and development for them. And this, of course, is the period with which we're most concerned. In April 2018, your career took another turn, and you were appointed on that date as Government Chief Scientific Advisor, and you remained in that post until March of this year. Yes.
That is just given as fact. Where is the interrogation about whether he had a conflict of interest? If you have £600,000 worth of shares in GlaxoSmithKline, you want people to be locked down, one might say, and therefore you want them to only be released when your vaccine is available. And he was put in charge of the vaccine task force. So tell me how that line of questioning is not pursued.
Yeah, now, you see, I personally, I don't know Vallance very well, but I don't think he would have been motivated by the £600,000, but he should have been challenged about it by the KC, he's a KC, because a lot of people watching might share your view, Bev, and be more cynical about it, think, of course he was financially motivated. I mean, 600,000, those shares, what would those shares be worth now after the vaccine rollout? We don't know, because I don't think we do know. We should know.
Why does it matter? Trust. It matters because what has been obliterated in the last 3 years is trust in those people who are meant to make decisions with our best interests at heart. Why? Because we feel like there is baked-in profit motive often with people who are making these sorts of decisions, which are life-changing.
The stuff about Rishi as well, we have to put it in context. Valance was repeating something he was told by Dominic Cummings. Now, I don't believe much that comes out of the mouth of Dominic Cummings, much of which is pretty foul anyway. But Dominic Cummings had an agenda, didn't he? He was anti-Boris Johnson by that time, anti-everything. And Rishi Sunak will have his opportunity to defend himself when he gives evidence. But it's interesting, Bev. The Mirror led on its day saying, let 'em die, really emotive, politicised headline. And Number 10 didn't flatten the story. So are they worried that there'll be other people who will corroborate what he said, albeit the context, I think, is because he was trying to protect the economy.
And what the Mirror is saying, when he's saying, Sunak was saying, let them die, well, you're happy now for people to be dying as a consequence of lockdown. Lots of people died in that first wave, not because of COVID, but because they didn't seek hospital treatments for other issues. They were too frightened.
Well, they still are dying.
And they still are dying. So, anyway.
Because people... And look at the NHS waiting list, 7.5 million. People who attack the Tories over that forget the fact we locked down.
So you're wrong, the Mirror. You're still wrong. You've been wrong for 3 years and you're still wrong now.
So the COVID-19 inquiry continues today. So Chris Witty, the other one of the two Ronnies, gives evidence. We're going to go live to our GB News presenter, Pip Thompson, who's at the inquiry. Pip.
Hello, good morning. In the last few minutes, Sir Chris Witty, England's Chief Medical Officer, has arrived to give evidence at this inquiry. It's likely to last all day today and perhaps into tomorrow as well. He'll be giving evidence, and then later in the week it will be his deputy, Sir Jonathan Van Tam. Now, what Sir Chris Witty has to say will be very interesting, because what has emerged so far is that his opinion over lockdown restrictions differed very greatly to his colleague, Sir Patrick Vallance, who was giving evidence yesterday. Sir Patrick Vallance thought that those lockdown restrictions should have been introduced a lot earlier. Sir Chris Witty was concerned about that. In fact, Sir Patrick Vallance said he was a delayer over lockdown, and it appears that that is because Sir Chris Witty was worried about the economic impact, the impact on people's health, because of the economy, because of the NHS, because of mental health problems as well. We also know that Sir Chris Witty was not convinced by the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. In fact, he labelled it as Eat Out to help out the virus. Now, he was appointed 3 months, only 3 months before the pandemic, and then he had to deal with the biggest health crisis in decades. We remember him so well, don't we, from those daily COVID briefings. I think we can show you pictures of that every day. We saw him, we saw Boris Johnson, and we saw the former Chief Scientific Advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, giving us all that advice. He became a national figure, so here its appearance today is highly anticipated. He has already given evidence earlier this year. He gave evidence in June, and he talked about how lockdowns were a very radical thing to do. They had not been considered before. And he also said that a key weakness was not able to scale up testing quickly enough, but no pandemic planning would have spotted the COVID virus. So what he has to say will be very enlightening indeed. I will be there. I will bring you the latest here on GB News.
Thank you, Pip. Fantastic assessment there. Thank you, Pip Thompson, there at the COVID inquiry where Chris Witty is giving evidence right now.
We forget those two men were such significant figures. They were in our lives in some ways more than our partners. Because they're in our front room every day, talking with the Prime Minister or with the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And the country had to follow them because what they said went. But now we know there was a fundamental split between the two of them. And the Prime Minister said he was following the science. Well, which bit of science?
And we still haven't been told why the pandemic preparedness plan that had been worked on for decades was ripped up, because it never said in there that we quarantined the healthy. And that's what we did. And my worry is we've now accepted that's just something we're now going to do in the future. We're just going to tell healthy people that you have to stay in your houses. That's not OK.
I don't think people would wear it again.
They wouldn't, but it won't be under the auspices of an infection next time, Andrew. It will be climate change. It will be, oh, the weather's too hot today, you can't go out. It'll be, you're not allowed to get on an aeroplane because you've had your carbon credits. It will be, you're not allowed to go and visit your family in your car because you've driven your car too much and your car is ruining the environment. It will all be under the eco agenda. So we have to be very, very aware of what is coming out of this inquiry. And frankly, the wrong questions are being asked.
Well, and we've got another 3 years of it, don't forget.
Oh,
At least.
give me strength.
Now, the Prime Minister, unusually, yesterday in a speech, promised that taxes will be cut in tomorrow's autumn statement to boost economic growth and reward hard work. This is what he said.
We will do this in a serious, responsible way, based on fiscal rules to deliver sound money and alongside the independent forecasts of the Office of Budget Responsibility. And we can't do everything all at once. It will take discipline, and we need to prioritise. But over time, we can and we will cut taxes.
All at once? Excuse me? They've
can't do it all at once.
Since 2010, and he's been Prime Minister for a year now. And we've got our autumn statement on Wednesday and then a budget. I mean, come on, mate.
You've not got that much longer left.
And did you notice the sign at the back behind him? Long-term decisions for our political future. Long-term? You've got about 10 months, mate, and then it'll be the general election. Although I'm still more and more warming to the idea that they're going to go in May. We're going to talk to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's in Downing Street. Chris, long-term decisions, he says. Well, he thinks he's going to be there in the long term, does he?
He's certainly hoping to be, isn't he? And he's made some big calls, isn't he, about reforming A-levels over a decade. But the immediate focus in the building behind me, number 11 Downing Street, is tomorrow's autumn statement. Now, we're getting a feel for what's happening here. The overall picture is the government feels they've done what Margaret Thatcher would have done. They've controlled inflation, as Thatcher did in the early 80s, and now come the tax cuts. But we'll wait and see what happens tomorrow. We're getting a feel for what may happen already. We think that state pension will go up by 8.5%. The triple lock will be respected, won't be watered down, and also benefits should go up by the September inflation rate. That's 6.7%, not the October one, 4.6%. He was tempted, we understand, to try and use the October rate to save £3 billion. That won't happen. Elsewhere, tax cuts, national insurance, that looks like that could be under the microscope tomorrow. That could come down. That's the jobs tax, which many of us pay through PAYE. We never really see it. Income tax always hogs the headline, but in fact, national insurance is a big size of our tax bills. But it's an interesting time, I think. The bigger focus also will be on getting the economy growing. You heard that from Claire Coutinho on breakfast just after 9 a.m. this morning. Full expensing is the idea there, to allow companies beyond 2026 to offset their tax bills and spend the money instead on investment, and that could trigger big investment in our companies. We do invest not as much as other companies comparable to us. So it's all happening behind me. People are arriving. I've been watching aides arrive for Jeremy Hunt today. We're here all day discussing the big day tomorrow, the autumn statement.
So the tax cuts that are announced tomorrow, when will they feed into people's pockets? Is it immediately, or do we have to wait till the new financial year in April?
Again, we'll know that tomorrow. Almost certainly, I think the new financial year starting in April, and that leaves him. He can almost make this plan for the next financial year in two parts: tomorrow, and then the March budget, when many people are expecting maybe a cut in the basic rate of income tax. But we don't expect that tomorrow. But I think anything can happen. They've got a suite of offerings they can do in the treasury behind me. We'll know soon enough. But I think any cuts, I think, Andrew, will be in the next financial year.
All right, Chris, that's Christopher Hope. They need to do it now.
It's not going to make any difference. Why do an autumn statement now if it's not going to happen until the budget next year?
And the point is, the autumn statement was an invention of Gordon Brown's. It was a way of trying to look like his government was doing something, and it was to tell us what's going to happen next year. Then we have the budget as well. But if people want the money in their pockets right now, because there's a cost of living crisis, Christmas is coming up, they want that money in their pocket, whether it's through national insurance, where they're going to raise the VAT threshold for small businesses from 85 to 90,000. Terrific. But do it now.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Right.
Another issue for Rishi Sunak. There is cabinet opposition to his plans to opt out of European human rights laws to try to salvage the Rwanda policy.
Pressure's also building from the right of the Conservative parties. The MP Mark Francois has called for a meeting of members of the European Research Group this evening.
And if Rishi Sunak's first 5 pledges were not enough, he's now got another 5. That should be a pub quiz question. Name them. We're going to go live now to Westminster with our very own Olivia Utley, who knows all 10 pledges. She can tell us which ones of the first 5 pledges they've met. Even we know that. 1. What is the point of 5 more pledges, Olivia? They haven't met the last lot.
Well, exactly. It feels as though Rishi Sunak, there are people breathing down his neck on all sides, and he is just desperately looking to show that he is doing something. At the moment, he is under huge pressure over his Plan B for Rwanda. The scheme that he's come up with involves designating Rwanda as a safe country via emergency legislation. Now, it sounded as though the Conservative Party were pretty much OK with that plan, but now it's emerged that Robert Jenrick, who is the immigration minister, still is immigration minister, but worked under Suella Braverman, seems to have taken some of what she said on board and wants to include in this legislation what's known as notwithstanding clauses, which would essentially allow the UK government to overrule the courts, both the domestic courts and the international courts, over human rights. Just basically say, well, we're not really interested in what you're going to rule. Rwanda is a safe country and we can deport migrants there anyway. Now, that has gone down well, by the sounds of it, with those on the right of the party, from the sort of European Research Group, those who would like eventually to leave the European Court of Rights altogether. But it's gone down badly with some of those more moderate or left-wing MPs, if you like, including some in the cabinet. Apparently, James Cleverly, the new Home Secretary, Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, and Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, are all very, very worried about any plan which involves essentially ignoring legislation about human rights. So Rishi Sunak has got a very, very thin tightrope to walk here, trying to keep everyone on all sides of the party happy. And another big issue for him is that even if this Rwanda legislation, his Plan B legislation, manages to get through Parliament, and that's a big if because, of course, the House of Lords are very, very likely to block it, then the quickest it could all be agreed is 42 days. That's as quick as you could get a law like this ratified, which would take us into the new year. And, of course, Rishi Sunak made that speech at the beginning of the year where he set out his 5 pledges. One of them was to stop the boats. He didn't actually put a date on it, but it was widely assumed that he meant by the end of this year. If not a single migrant has left this country for Rwanda by the 31st of December, most of Westminster will interpret that as Rishi Sunak having failed on his pledge. And that could make the Conservatives' position in the polls even worse than it is now.
There's no chance of it by the end of the year, and I think, Olivia, it's almost impossible to predict before May.
Thank you, Olivia. Olivia Otley there in Westminster. We will be talking to you later, Olivia. Let us know your thoughts this morning on those pledges. Do they fill you with joy at the prospect of another Conservative government? And you've been getting in touch this morning about I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Keith. I'm not joking. Keith, he says, honestly, my name is Keith. I'm on a beach in southern India.
Are you really?
Where
is he from?
He's in southern India.
Oh,
I'm listening to you both. It's nearly 3:15 p.m. As always, a fabulous show. Keep up the great work. Us Keiths get everywhere.
Quite
Keith
right.
Chadney is even given us his surname.
What time is it? It's 3:15.
3:15 in the afternoon. And lots of people saying they love the fact that GBNews is getting a mention on I'm a Celebrity. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. And a trade deal with South Korea.
They're doing us a favour.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Contrast across the UK as we begin the day. Mild but grey in the southeast, brighter but colder elsewhere, and then a fine day follows for many. We've got the last of the unsettled weather clearing for now from the southeast. A lot of low cloud, mist and fog first thing, with some showery rain continuing into the afternoon for parts of eastern England, especially East Anglia. Elsewhere, brighter skies, but a chill in the air first thing. A crisp autumn day follows for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and western England, as well as Wales. 8 to 10 Celsius generally, 12 towards the south east. And this window of fine weather continues to progress southwards as we close out Tuesday. And that means it's clear skies finally by the evening across the south and southeast, and a frost is possible overnight. But further north, cloud and rain return, with those outbreaks of rain accompanied by a strengthening wind for Scotland, Northern Ireland and northern England. That means it will be a milder start here tomorrow morning, but a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain continuing through the morning, especially for western and central Scotland. Meanwhile, dribs and drabs of rainfall push south with thickening cloud across southern parts, but actually still some brightness and mostly dry, it has to be said, across southern counties of England. and central parts of England as well as South Wales. Here, temperatures will reach 13 Celsius. Further north, not feeling very pleasant with the cloud, wind and rain.
Well, thanks, Aidan. Up next, with the autumn statement looming, many of us will be keeping a keen eye on petrol and diesel prices, hoping for reduction. I don't think it's coming. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 21st of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, one of the most recognisable faces from the COVID pandemic, the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Witty, he is giving evidence today at the COVID inquiry. We'll be there with the latest.
Tory tax cuts. Rishi Sunak has said that his government can and will cut taxes in the autumn statement tomorrow. We'll be discussing the chances of the price at the pump going down.
And global Britain, the UK and South Korea will sign a new long-term trade agreement covering defence and technology. Business Minister Greg Cans will be joining us shortly.
Berated over Brexit last night on I'm a Celebrity, first date star Fred Sirieix challenged Nigel Farage over Brexit.
The thing is the intolerance that came because Brexit was about immigration. And I remember your poster.
Yeah,
which I thought it was shameful what you did, Nigel. But it was about demonising migrants.
And saying that was wrong.
No, it wasn't. Maybe in your view it was, but it wasn't.
But it's not only just my view.
And on I'm a Celebrity, Ant and Deb, well, they were at it again last night. Just have a listen to this.
Kick it off with Nigel's take on Boris Johnson.
Oh, evening, former Prime Minister.
You what? He's not going to be watching.
Why not?
Well, he's got a new show on GB News, hasn't he?
Has he? Has he now? All their viewers are going to be well excited.
Hi, Keith.
Hi, Linda.
It's funny, they said it the night
brilliant.
before. I think they're going to probably say it every night. It means GB News is getting a very large audience.
Let us know your thoughts this morning, GB Views at gbnews.com, particularly
to Linda.
Exactly. Right, first, though, here's your very latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The leader of the Hamas terror group says a deal for what he calls a truce with Israel is close to being agreed. The group's leader, who is based in Qatar, released a statement in the last few hours, raising hopes of a pause in the fighting. Negotiations are said to be centering on how long the truce may last and details of a prisoner exchange that could see the release of Israeli hostages. Israel has not commented on the reports. However, US President Joe Biden says a deal is close. The government's most senior medical advisor during the pandemic is due to give evidence at the COVID inquiry later. Chief Medical Officer Professor Chris Witty was a leading figure in the government's response to the virus, often appearing in press conferences. The inquiry has already heard that he privately referred to Rishi Sunak's plan to revive the hospitality sector as "eat out to help the virus out." So Chris's highly anticipated appearance comes a day after former Chief Scientific Advisor Sir Patrick Vallance claimed Boris Johnson was bamboozled by COVID data. Tax cuts and welfare reforms are expected to be announced by the Chancellor tomorrow. Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement is expected to bring changes to benefits, which could see those with mental health or mobility problems told to look for work. Reports suggest that benefits could be cut by more than £4,000 a year for some people. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, told GB News the Prime Minister is making the right decisions for the country.
The Prime Minister and Chancellor have taken some really difficult decisions in the last year, which has meant that inflation has now halved. It's at 4.6%. That is great news for everybody at home who we know have been struggling with the cost of living. And it means now the Chancellor is focusing tomorrow on growing the economy, making sure we are increasing the amount of supply side capacity. That's the amount that we can produce in this country. And a part of that is a path to lower taxes, because we know how important that is to everybody sitting at home.
Government borrowing was higher than expected in October, reportedly due to the cost of living payments and benefits. The Office for National Statistics says public sector net borrowing stood at £14.9 billion last month. That's £4.4 billion more than the year before. The Chancellor says that while the government has reduced inflation, more work is needed to achieve the Bank of England's goal of 2%. Lancashire Police has been criticised for its handling of the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. A review found failings in the way personal information about Miss Bulley's health struggles was disclosed to the press, which contributed to wild speculation. It said that non-reportable background information should have been provided to the media to help shape responsible reporting without disclosing sensitive information. Dr. Ian Raphael, who led the review, said it showed the importance of the trust between media and police. School holidays in Wales may be shortened under proposals put forward by the government. Welsh Education Minister Jeremy Miles says the long summer break can be a strain on families, with disadvantaged students suffering from a loss of learning. A consultant opens today on altering the term calendar. It could see the summer holidays shortened with the addition of a new 2-week autumn break. The Association of Head Teachers says it's bewildered by the plan and that no evidence has been presented to show how it would benefit young people. A search is underway for 4 young men who've been reported missing in the north of Wales. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Henderson and Hugo Morris haven't been accounted for since Sunday morning. They were last seen in a silver Ford Fiesta as they headed off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. North Wales Police is appealing to anyone with information to contact them. New laws to deal with the legacy of the Troubles in Northern Ireland will be challenged in court today. The new legislation would see limited immunity from prosecution for offences related to the Troubles for those who cooperate with new independent commission. It would also prevent new civil and legacy inquests. Multiple victims and families have launched challenges to the plans. The case at Belfast Royal Courts of Justice is expected to last several days. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, I can still remember the horror of the way the police handled the disappearance of Nicola Bulley, the mum talking about the fact she had a drink problem.
She's menopausal.
All sorts of issues came tumbling out. So there's now, there is a press conference, I think, right now, which we can cross to because the body of Nicola Bulley, if you remember, was found by a river about a mile from where she vanished. An inquest concluded her death was accidental. So let's go now to that press conference.
And it is my job to hold the police to account. This review was commissioned to answer those questions so that I could take external assurance and expertise to be able to answer them effectively, and to ensure that all of UK policing can learn lessons from this missing from home investigation that attracted unprecedented global interest. This review has been timed to conclude when other statutory bodies have finished their own proceedings, to ensure that they can be captured as part of this process. These were the coroner's inquest to determine Nicola's cause of death. The coroner returned a verdict of death by accidental death by drowning. The Information Commissioner's Office to determine the lawfulness of the release of personal information about Nicola. They determined the release to be lawful. The Independent Office for Police Conduct to consider the self-referral by Lancashire Constabulary. They considered there to be no case for misconduct. I commissioned the College of Policing to conduct the review as the national independent body for police training and standards, including being the home for the National Centre for Police Search. It was commissioned to review the period from when Nicola was first reported missing to the point at which she was sadly discovered. It will have 3 work streams to focus on: the search and investigation, communications and media engagement, and the disclosure of personal information. I would like to thank the College for their diligent, professional and thorough work over the past few months. I have received their findings, their conclusions and recommendations, and as Commissioner, I accept them in full. As part of the process, I asked the College to notify me immediately if they discovered anything that would amount to action needing to be taken against any officer or employee of the constabulary for misconduct or negligence of duty, or anything that would have altered the outcome of the search and investigation or indicated that Nicola could definitely have been found sooner. There have been no such findings, and therefore this review is very much a learning review. with a number of recommendations which, given the unprecedented nature of this case, are mainly for policing nationally. There are also many areas of this case where Lancashire Constabulary represented the very best of policing, with the search and investigation being well resourced, professionally conducted and calling upon national good practice. It is often too easy to sweep past significant amounts of good work and exemplary conduct to get to the areas of learning in a review. Given the whole core of this operational response is praised by the review, I would therefore like to take the opportunity to pause and thank the many officers, staff and volunteers of Lancashire Constabulary who worked tirelessly and professionally to find Nicola. I know that this is not the outcome any of them wanted, but they did their utmost for Nicola and her family. Following on from the publication of this review, I have informed the Chief Constable of Lancashire Constabulary that I want a full report on how the Constabulary will implement all of the recommendations for it in this review to be presented to me at an accountability board early in the new year. I will now hand over to Chief Constable Andy Marsh, the Chief Executive of the College of Policing, to talk through the review.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, and thank you all for coming today. Firstly, I want to start by recognising the immense tragedy at the centre of this report, the death of Nicola Bulley. The loss of Nicola has left her family and friends dealing with immeasurable grief. My thoughts continue to be with them. As they are approaching their first Christmas without Nicola, I know that we'll all agree we must consider their feelings as we talk about this report. I would also like to pay tribute to Nicola's family's strength and patience. Now we've completed this review, I hope they're given the space to grieve in peace. The College is responsible for setting standards for the police in England and Wales. We used evidence-based knowledge in everything we develop, and we've reviewed this case against those robust standards. The College was commissioned by Lancashire's Police and Crime Commissioner, Andrew Snowden, in February of this year to undertake a fully independent review of the operational response to the reported missing person, Nicola Bulley. The review was tasked with providing insight into the effectiveness of the Constabulary's response over the course of the period that Nicola was missing. We've now formally presented this report to the Police and Crime Commissioner. The purpose of the College of Policing review was not to attribute blame or rerun the investigation into Nicola's disappearance and death, but rather to identify the learning for Lancashire Police and policing more broadly. We've not shied away from criticism, and I'll come to the areas for learning we've identified. But I want to start by saying we found the police investigation and search to have been well conducted by Lancashire Constabulary. We spoke to many officers and police staff and volunteers who worked on this investigation, and their dedication and commitment was clear to see. They demonstrated the very best of policing. Their professionalism and operational activity was exemplary, and while there's much to learn from this tragic incident, Lancashire Constabulary should be recognised for that. I also want to put on record my sincere thanks to everyone who supported this review, answered our questions and provided us with any information we requested. We found a genuine willingness to learn. I don't propose to go through each recommendation made in the report in detail, but rather speak to the overall issues that we found. Looking at all of the evidence available to us, we believe the decision not to declare a critical incident set the tone within the constabulary and led to several challenges. The College of Policing defines a critical incident as any incident where the effectiveness of the police response is likely to have a significant impact on the confidence of the victim, their family and or the community. This investigation clearly met that definition. So whilst we found the constabulary deployed considerable resources and identified Nicola's disappearance as high risk, the failure to declare a critical incident is significant and impacts on the decision-making process throughout the investigation. As you'll know, Nicola's disappearance received unprecedented levels of interest from both mainstream media and social media. Lancashire Constabulary's press office logged more than 500 media calls and 75,000 inbound social media comments over a period of about a month. At the peak of media attention, the investigation generated 6,500 news articles globally in a single day. On social media, the BBC estimated that TikTok alone featured 270 million videos with the hashtag of Nicola Bulley's name. There is no doubt how hard the communications team worked during this investigation. Many worked long hours, provided sound advice and tried their absolute best. But we found the constabulary did not recognise the extent of the media interest in this case, or the impact that it was having on public confidence. The coverage of Nicola's disappearance was on a par with...
Andy Marsh, who's the he's a police senior copper, who's the chief executive of the College of Policing, which did the investigation into how Lancashire Police got it so terribly, terribly wrong.
That's right. So that's a 143-page report which has just landed this morning, which is why they're responding to it. And effectively, what the conclusion is that Lancashire Police didn't cooperate with the media early on in the investigation, and therefore there were a few sort of chances, social media, YouTubers, and also the professional diver, Peter Faulding, if you remember, he got involved, and they're saying that that very much confused the messaging that was getting out.
The body wasn't in the river, and then there was the theory about the white van that had been spotted, had she been kidnapped?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the police didn't help by disclosing that she was menopausal and had a drink problem, so then the speculation was she'd taken her own life. Yeah. Harrowing for her partner and family. Yeah, just badly managed, really, all round. They said the police did a good job of the investigation, but they didn't know how to work with the media, social media and mainstream media. Interesting, because this is the future. Police are going to have to work it out. Huge. Look, you know, 6,500 media reports in one day. Yeah. Now, we're moving on. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt under huge pressure to lower petrol and diesel prices in the autumn statement tomorrow. That's right. More than 40,000 supporters of Fair Fuel UK want this to be announced. So joining us now is the founder of Fair Fuel UK, Howard Cox. Morning, Howard. Great to see you. Shall we take a bet on whether there's going to be any reduction in fuel tax tomorrow in this autumn statement? I'm saying no.
I'm sorry to say, Andrew, you're absolutely right. I've got some information from Whitehall to say it's going to remain frozen. The most important thing, and I'm getting a lot of feedback from you, I'm hearing my voice twice. It's not a pretty sound.
I hear enough of your voice. You hear it twice. If we hear it twice, we don't mind, Howard.
Yeah, what they've got to do is not only keep it frozen, and preferably cut it, of course, but also to stop the opportunistic profiteering that's going on in the fuel supply chain. That's one of the things that is really worrying to a lot of people who, you know, at the moment, diesel and petrol are currently between 5 and 10p higher than they should be, with the oil prices where they are and where the wholesale prices are. And that's what he should introduce, Pump Watch, which is backed by the Competitions and Market Authority, back in July, and we still have not seen any sign of this in operation.
I'm just looking here. The UK average for unleaded petrol, 151.7. If you buy it on a motorway, £1.77. It's outrageous, the difference.
Well, I'm afraid that's what the problem is happening in the marketplace. You and I believe in free markets, but when it's actually opportunistic attacks on hard-pressed motorists, 37 million drivers in this country, they all vote. And we just recently did, Fairfield UK, in that thing about 40,000 you said, they took part in a poll. And for the first time in the 13, 14 years I've been campaigning, we're now seeing that voters are not supporting Tories. Believe it or not, they're supporting the Labour Party more. And I just cannot believe what's happening here, that this party still doesn't recognise that motorists are actually a solution to bringing down inflation rather than just being used as cash cows.
Yeah. OK, Howard, short and sweet, but always good to talk to you. Howard Cox there from Fair Fuel UK.
That figure is disgraceful.
It is.
26p difference.
Yeah.
A litre. Yeah,
it's awful. We're just completely having the mickey taken out of us, aren't we, as motorists? Right, the UK and South Korea are set to sign a new long-term agreement covering defence and technology cooperation.
So we're joined now by the Business Minister, who's also the Conservative MP for Chelsea and Fulham, Greg Cans. Morning to you, Minister.
Good morning.
How significant is this deal?
Well, I think it's got potential to be very significant. We're moving on from the existing deal we have with South Korea, which was signed in 2011. It was an EU deal at that time. Obviously, the world has moved on over the last 12 years. Technology has changed. We can go a lot further in our trade relationship. We're delighted to have President Yoon here at the moment, and we can go a lot further in taking that trade relationship, already £16 billion per annum, much further still with a new deal.
Tangible differences, Greg. How is this going to affect people who might be sitting at home at the moment? What industries would they have to work in to benefit from this?
Well, potentially everybody, of course, is a consumer, so everybody has the potential to benefit from the two-way goods flow and flow in services. I would expect that we'll go further on things like services, we'll go further on things like digital trade, and potentially the ability to share data better. The EU is very protectionist when it comes to data. It's an existing EU deal that we rolled over. So I think we've got potential to go further there. So I think there's lots of areas that we can go further. The South Korea is an incredibly close friend of the UK. We're very like-minded when it comes to free trade, free markets. We look at the world in a very similar way. So I think huge amount of potential there. But obviously we haven't started the negotiation yet. So let's see what the deal brings.
OK, because sharing people's data doesn't sound that attractive, Greg. I can't lie to you. But what do we sell that South Korea want, and what do they sell that we want, apart from very nice cars?
Well, actually, we actually do sell a lot of cars between ourselves. The UK exports cars and automotive parts to South Korea and vice versa. But just to return to your data point, actually, if you have a trusted data partner, there's no need to be nervous about other people holding anonymized data. What this does allow is UK companies to base themselves, start exporting to South Korea, particularly financial technology companies, fintech companies. The UK is a global leader. If you're in a fintech business, the last thing you want to do is to find a local data provider in South Korea. That adds an enormous amount of expense and inconvenience to break into that market. So we're in the business of helping our exporters. Exporters exporting more helps generate jobs. So that is actually a really important thing, to be able to do more with data, and it really helps UK businesses, particularly cutting-edge businesses like in the technology sector.
Can we ask you about the 5 new pledges the Prime Minister announced yesterday, Greg Hands? He only managed to achieve one of the last 5 pledges, so we've now got another 5 pledges. Why do we need 10 pledges when we only fulfilled one of the last 5 pledges, if you keep up with me?
Well, look, I think we've fulfilled the first of those really important pledges. The #1 pledge was to halve inflation. We'll go further still. We're still working hard on the boats, for example. Boat arrivals are down by 1/3 this year. We need to get that new treaty, international treaty, and the new legislation in relation to Rwanda. I think on hospitals, we're continuing to make progress. It's not been helped by the strike. So actually, we've got a good story to tell on the 5 priorities being delivered already. And we're going to be looking forward to delivering yet more for the British people in the coming months.
Now, what did you do wrong to get sacked as Tory party chairman in the reshuffle? Was it all those by-election defeats?
Well, look, I think it's... it's always a difficult time being chairman of a political party when you're behind in the opinion polls. But you know, I'm back at the Department for Business and Trade, and that's not a bad place to be. But I was disappointed to be moved on as Conservative Party chairman. But I would say that it's not an easy time being chairman of a political party in today's environment in general, and particularly when you're a little bit behind in the opinion poll.
A little bit behind. You're quite a lot behind. I think the last poll I saw you were 20 points behind, Minister.
Well, we've still got work to do. That's exactly why Rishi Sunak is laying out his vision for the future yesterday, whilst continuing to deliver on the priorities that we already have, and we are making progress.
Greg, one last question. Terrible polling in the weekend's paper saying that Rishi Sunak will become the first Prime Minister to lose his own seat. How do you greet that as a minister?
Well, I think that's very, very unlikely. and opinion polls are not the same as general elections. I'm not expecting to be a general election anytime very soon, and we will continue to work hard and continue to get our message out to the British people that Rishi Sunak is the voice for the future, compared to a Labour Party which wants to take us back to the failed politics of the past.
All right, that's Greg Cairns. He's the business minister.
We appreciate it, Greg.
And robust he is too. Thanks for coming on, Greg. That's Greg Cairns.
Right, still to come. From Brexit to flexing it, Josie Gibson was left in hysterics on last night's episode of I'm a Celebrity. She was confronted by Nigel Farage's bare bottom within hours of meeting him. Yes, you heard that right. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
.29 with Britain's News and on GB News, Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner. I'm a Celebrity. Nigel Farage got through the second day in the jungle. We're going to talk now to somebody who's won the jungle.
That's right.
Because Nigel faced a supper of camel's udders. What else did he have to eat, Bev?
I think it was 5 different types of penis.
Yeah.
Sheep udders, anus, actually. Crocodile anus, goat anus.
Well, somebody knows all about eating such delicacies. is a great friend of this show, the wonderful Christopher Biggins, who won I'm a Celebrity some years ago. Christopher, what delicacies did you have to dine on when you were in the jungle?
Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Bev. Well, I tell you, I really, in those days, it was easier. All I had to eat was the kangaroo's penis. And I remember saying at the time, I've had worse things in my mouth.
I remember that.
It was disgusting. I also had a witchetty grub, which you have to bite the end of the head off, which they did last night. I have to say that I'm I've never heard of her, like you always in the Celebrity Get Me Out of Here, the people you've never heard of. Is it Suella or something? Or
Nella Rose.
What's that?
Nella Rose.
Nella, that's right, Nella. She is brilliant. She was wonderful last night.
She's very dramatic.
Sorry?
She's very dramatic, Christopher, and those people come across well, don't they, on I'm a Celebrity?
Yeah, but she's also very funny. And the way she ate those pizzas was wonderful. And Nigel was brilliant too. I mean, he ate them all.
Yeah. Do you think
he must be starving?
What did you think? We had the dubious pleasure of seeing Nigel's bare bottom, Christopher. I don't recall we saw your bare bottom.
No, I kept my underwear on, and I remember washing in underneath the underwear with stuff. And it's very, remember, that is icy cold too, that shower. I mean, he was very brave, but I don't think he realised he was being filmed.
Is it unusual for people to shower naked in there? Because we often get the bikini scene, don't we? Mylene Klaas famously in her white bikini. It's quite unusual for people to go completely naked.
It is unusual because people who know the show know they're going to be filming. And of course, I don't think he had any idea. I don't think he had any idea about the whole show, actually, funny enough. All he knew about was the money he was getting.
Yes, well, a lot of money too. We're just going to have a quick... Nigel, Christopher, stay there, because we're just going to have a look now. If you're listening on the radio, this is what Nigel had to do last night in the jungle.
That's it. Go on, Nigel. You can do this.
You're smashing it. You're doing so good, so good. Yeah, just get it all on there. You're doing so good.
I'm afraid you've got quite a bit to...
Try and tidy up that plate a bit. Very good.
I'm proud of us.
We did very well.
What comes across, I think that was liquidised penis he was eating there, or maybe anus. What comes across is how unflappable he is, Christopher. And any of us who know Nigel know that it takes a lot to ruffle him. He's very calm, isn't he?
He is, and I think people are realising that, the viewers, because he wasn't voted to do the thing tonight. So I think they realise he'll do everything that's asked of him.
Can he win it?
No.
Oh.
Oh.
My winner was when I first knew who was in there was Josie. But I think Nella now is a good second. I mean, she could win.
What did you make?
I think it'll definitely be a queen this year. Yes, pardon?
Sorry, Christopher. What did you make of the debate about Brexit last night? Because the most interesting thing for me was how many people, including Grace Dent, who's a journalist, who all just scuttled away and didn't want to have anything to do with it. I'd have been right there in the campfire. That was the best bit.
Lovely idea, but we've run out of time. We'll talk to you another time about it, Christopher. Bye-bye. That's Christopher Biggins, the former... He won it, of course. Now, Patrick Vallance told the COVID inquiry Rishi Sunak wanted to let people die and contradicted the now Prime Minister's evidence on EAT to help out. We're going to go now, though, to the news headlines.
It's 10:34. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The leader of the Hamas terror group says a deal for what he calls a truce with Israel is close to being agreed. The group's leader, who is based in Qatar, released a statement in the last few hours, raising hopes of a pause in the fighting. Negotiations are said to be centring on how long the truce may last and details of a prisoner exchange that could see the release of Israeli hostages. Israel has not commented on the reports. However, US President Joe Biden says a deal is close. The government's most senior medical advisor during the pandemic is giving evidence at the COVID inquiry. Sir Chris Witty told the inquiry moments ago that he often met with international health officials, including the World Health Organization, and that Britain's approach to the virus was dependent on those discussions. He said conversations were always had internally, with ideas thrashed out before any advice was provided to the Prime Minister. He also suggested evidence given by Sir Patrick Vallance yesterday may have been more exciting due to his upcoming book. Lancashire Police has been criticised for its handling of the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. A review found failings in the way personal information about Miss Bulley's health struggles was disclosed to the press, which contributed to wild speculation. It said that non-reportable background information should have been provided to the media to help shape responsible reporting without disclosing sensitive information. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2535 and 1.1450 euros. And the price of gold is £1,585 and 12 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,462 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Can we just reflect a little bit on what we just heard in the news then? That Chris Witty, yesterday, Patrick Vallance has just accused him of giving a more dramatic...
Witty accusing Vallance.
Sorry, Witty accusing Vallance. My head is spinning, of giving the wrong evidence to the COVID inquiry because he's got a book coming out. It's a bit more serious than that. Wow.
Well, that really would be a conflict of interest.
Well, we'll have our guests in here in a little while. We'll have a little chat about that. And also, the president of South Korea has arrived for a state visit in the UK. We're going to go live to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:40. You're with Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Just want to clarify what I was saying before the break. We heard this news. This break, and we've got the COVID inquiry going on. It's all very fast-moving this morning. It appears that Chris Witty was asked about the relationship between him and Patrick Vallance, and they were talking about Jeremy Farrar, who is a member of Sage. And actually, it was Witty who said that Farrar had a book to sell, not Patrick Vallance. So just want to make that clear. That it wasn't between the two of them. But still, why are you asking him? Why is Hugo Keith even asking Chris Witty? Was there tension between the two of you? It's not a soap opera. It's about who was doing what and why, so that we don't make the same mistakes in the future.
It is a soap opera. That's what the whole inquiry's turned into, I'm afraid. Now, the President of the Republic of South Korea is here, accompanied by his wife. He will be meeting
What's
the King.
What's his name, Andrew?
I'm not going to bother to pronounce it because I'm not even going to try. Yoon something or other. It sounds like something you might order at a Chinese takeaway. Am I allowed to say that? Probably shouldn't say that. He's called Yoon Suk Yeol.
Well
I think
done.
that does sound like something. And he's guest of the King. He's here as because there's about to sign a major trade deal. Cameron Walker is our royal correspondent.
He was, until he heard that. Hello, Cameron. Give us a proper pronunciation of who our very honoured guest is.
President Yoon Suk Yeol, I think, is how you pronounce it, Bev and Andrew. Yes, it's the first state visit of incoming state visit for the King since his coronation. But it's going to be very much a family affair because the Prince and Princess of Wales are playing a key role this morning, collecting the President of South Korea and the First Lady from their hotel in London and taking them to Horse Guards Parade for a ceremonial welcome of pomp and pageantry, as we do so well here in Great Britain, including a guard of honour that the King and the President will inspect, which will be the Scots Guards this morning. And then there'll be a big carriage procession up to Buckingham Palace behind me. The President's also expected to speak with politicians inside the Palace of Westminster later on today. And this evening there will be the magnificent States banquet, as we can expect, with all the pomp and pageantry. We're going to have tiaras, we're going to have white tie, all the rest of it. But this tour is not without controversy because it's been reported that opponents of President Yoon Suk Yeol are basically saying that he is trying to stifle free speech, particularly when it comes to news reports criticising his government. Now, in response, the President says that he is trying to tackle what he describes as fake news. But this appears to be in contrast to what Queen Camilla said last night at a reception. She was being made an honorary member of the Foreign Press Association, where she said in a speech last night, true freedom of expression is at the heart of our democratic system. Well, no doubt because the King and Queen are well versed now with the powers of soft diplomacy that they had. I'm sure the soft chit-chat that they'll be having with the President and the First Lady will not touch that topic. But of course, it's the Foreign Office that organises these states visits, and it is very much about strengthening diplomatic ties between the two countries. And this morning we've had two announcements from the government, the first of which is that South Korea and the UK have agreed to enforce sanctions against North Korea with joint sea patrols preventing the nation from developing a illegal weapons program. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the President expected to sign a joint agreement this week. Also, there is expected to be some trade talks of a potential new trade deal with South Korea as well. So lots of diplomatic stuff to look forward to this week, as well as the ceremonial pomp and pageantry when it comes to the royal family. But just to end on a bit of a lighter note, there was a state visit that the South Korean president went on to the United States in April, and he was at the dinner at the White House. It was found out that he's a big fan of karaoke and actually serenaded the entire room at the request of President Joe Biden with the song American Pie, which left a big standing ovation to the guests there. So will we see similar scenes inside the ballroom of Buckingham Palace today? We'll have to wait and see.
OK.
That's Cameron Walker, our Royal President. And apologies for any offence caused by my clumsy description, but I was trying to say his words, and I shouldn't have described it as something you might order in a takeaway. So no offence caused. I hope I've caused no offence.
We accept your apology.
Please do. In the studio with us are lovely Tonya Buxton and even lovelier Nigel Nelson. And we're talking about the lovely...
We're going to be talking about I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. There was a big debate about Brexit. Have a watch.
The thing is the intolerance that came because Brexit was about immigration. And I remember your poster, which I thought it was shameful what you did, Nigel.
Sadly, it was absolutely true.
What was the poster, sorry? Can I just cut in? Can you educate
It was
us
a
little bit
poster
more,
just showing mass young men moving illegally across borders.
But it was about demonising migrants.
And saying that was wrong.
No, it wasn't. I mean, in your view it was, but it wasn't.
But it's not only just my view.
Tonya, I love seeing that frank debate like that. I think maybe Nigel probably had a little bit more to say that lost in the edit.
Yeah.
Weren't you fascinated by the way the other celebrities scuttled away and didn't want to engage with it?
Yeah, no, I'm not fascinated. It's exactly how they behave, isn't it? Because they're pathetic and spineless, and they should have...
Say what you mean, Tonya.
Well, the reality is they've got lots to say when they're writing their columns, they've got lots to say when they're doing their Instagrams, they've got lots to say then. When they've got the man they can actually ask a question to...
Yeah, good point.
They scuttle off. I thought it was pathetic. And also, I do think that it was lost in the edit. I know that Nigel had a lot to say. And Fred was completely flummoxed in the sense that he said, oh, your shameful poster. What did it show? It showed loads of men arriving in the country.
And they still are.
And they still are, and it proved to be true. So what was shameful about telling the truth?
That poster is so memorable, Nigel.
Yeah.
And it does still... it doesn't always do Nigel any favours, does it? Because it kind of reduced what was quite a complex conversation to something, a very powerful and reductive image.
Yes, it does. And I think that was interesting that it came up last night, because you remember the poster.
Yeah.
You don't remember the issues behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, the issue behind Brexit was sovereignty. It was about being able to make our own laws in this country, controlling borders, which we failed to do, so Brexit hasn't delivered that. But I thought the poster was appalling. I thought that it was verging on racism, and I'm not sure that Nigel would actually do that poster again if he was repeating the whole thing.
I agree.
And it did cause tension in the Brexit camp, because people like Michael Gove didn't support the poster, if you
distanced himself from it immediately,
because there was vote leave and then there was Nigel's side of the argument.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think on both sides during the whole Brexit thing that the arguments being put forward were disgraceful, and that goes for the Remainer side as much as it does for the Brexit side. We should have actually had a chance to consider that more soberly than we did. My view is if you're going to make huge changes like that, something like a Royal Commission to examine all the evidence will be much better than a political campaign which just made things up.
Oh, but Nigel, you know, a Royal Commission takes 5 years to report.
Well, not necessarily. You can do it.
Kicking it into the long
You can do it in a year. We haven't had one since I think 1999 or something.
Right.
So it may be, but something like that, where people are presented with the evidence and not a political campaign. And in fairness to what happened last night on I'm a Celeb, Nigel was actually explaining that.
Yeah.
He was explaining to the campmates what Brexit was in the simplest possible terms.
And he does it in a very good way, I think.
Yeah, and so there was nothing he said last night about Brexit. I would disagree as far as the facts are concerned.
But the reason they scuttled off is because then they won't be able to keep calling him a xenophobic racist if he explains it nicely.
I think they scuttled off because there are more important things in the jungle to worry about.
No, they went to wash up. They went to wash up.
Because Hancock, when he was in the jungle, Matt Hancock was under sustained criticism. Remember by Boy George?
Oh, not enough.
Yeah, over COVID. But there was a great opportunity last night for them all to get stuck in, and I thought they were all going to get stuck in on Nigel, and I thought he's going to have his...
But do you know what? But I think you're right, Tony, because it shows, especially people like Grace Dent, who is a journalist, she can be a biting writer.
She can be. She's very gobby.
Get stuck in.
And get in there. You've got something to say. Don't just scuttle off.
Well, they've got a few more weeks yet to have a go.
Yeah, there is.
I can't see it changing. I think they're all going to see how bright and intelligent Nigel is and how he's got a great, competent argument, and they're going to be talking less and less about it. Because they don't want to be made to look like fools because they don't have the answers. They've just had this kind of slogan that they're going to use against it without any real gravitas behind it.
We were talking to Christopher Biggins a little earlier, Tonya, and we asked him, can he win? Christopher won, of course, famously. He said, absolutely not. Do you think he can?
I think he'll be in the last three.
So do I.
I do think he'll be in the last three. I know Josie. She's the sweetest, kindest, most lovely woman on earth. So I think if she's allowed to shine through, she will win the hearts and minds of the public.
She's got that great Bristol accent, hasn't she?
And the young lot. I mean, my daughter was watching it last night because Nella's in there. She would not have been watching it.
She's the only one that my daughters know is Nella Rose.
Exactly.
I never heard, because I know her.
It's that division between the generations. She's not on proper telly. She's a YouTuber.
I'd never seen Nella before, but I was really impressed with her. I thought she had a great personality. It really stood out. Nigel obviously likes her hugely, as she does him. And I would have thought that if you're looking for a possible winner, if Nella carries on the way she's going, she's in with a chance.
And you know what? My 14-year-old was watching Nigel Farage and she said, how do I know him? How do I know him? She's watching and she's listening. She listened to his voice. She went, oh, he's the guy off TikTok.
There we are. How clever.
It's because Nigel is actually quite big on TikTok.
Huge
right, moving on.
TikTok.
Autumn statement tomorrow. Nigel, it's going to be a little bit frustrating because we understand from Chris Hope earlier today that none of these policies are going to be enacted until the spring, even if they do reduce national insurance. What tax cuts do you think we might be looking at?
Well, he seems to have gone back on inheritance tax. I mean, basically, what Jeremy Hunt's looking for is a nice big headline to say, we tax cuts. That's what he's after.
But we're not going to get them until April.
Well, I mean, he can announce them tomorrow. There is obviously, we'll have to see whether or not they can come in before April.
Well, why can't they?
Well, they could.
They
could, but the problem about it is, I mean, I find this whole tax cut business completely bizarre on the basis that both Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt were saying, look, we can't have them because it'll fuel inflation. So we looked for a tax cut that wouldn't. Certainly inheritance tax falls into that category because people tend not to splurge their inheritance. Things like national insurance, it will fuel inflation. And if you end up in a situation whereby that you give people a big tax cut, inflation goes up, Bank of England then raise interest rates again, you've lost the benefit of the tax cut.
But equally, we saw retail figures last month, Nigel, collapse. They fell off the cliff. People haven't got any money. They've got no confidence. You need to put money back in people's pockets. Let people decide how to spend the money rather than government spending it for us.
Yeah, but the whole thing is what you don't want to do is then fuel price rises along the way. So at the moment, there's still a reasonable demand for goods. I mean, the last time we had a big tax cut was in 2009 after the financial crash, when VAT was lowered by 2.5%. Now, at that time, there was demand was really low because of the crash. At the moment, demand isn't low, and that's why if you start whacking more money back into the economy, prices will start going up.
So Labour will vote against tax cuts, will they?
Well, I mean, Labour wouldn't do it, but the problem about it is that what Labour have said is they will take whatever Tory spending plans they inherit, spending and tax plans they inherit when they get into government. So although Labour will probably vote against it and will say they're against it, it doesn't mean they'll abolish it.
Right. What do you think, Tonya?
Well, I think the whole way of dealing with inflation in this country has gone about wrong. In the sense that, you know, they keep giving the bitter pill, and the bitter pill is now poisoning the people. So, you know, if you've got a temperature, you take paracetamol. You don't just keep taking paracetamol. It'll kill you. And that's what inflation has done to us. So we need to really look at how we bring inflation down, because it's not a spending inflation. It was an inflation brought upon us because of the lockdowns and the struggles that we had through that.
And the money printing.
And the money printing, that's what did it. It was the money printing. And it's wrong.
Quantitative easing, the posh expression.
Well, it's just... and that's what needs to be fixed. They need to look into... And I think, you know, the whole thing about inheritance tax... Now, I'm Greek. We don't have inheritance tax in Cyprus. For me, it seems like the most illegal tax in the world. You know, here is my father. He's worked I mean, my parents were immigrants. They worked all the hours God gave. They paid tax on it, and then you've worked to give it to me, his child, and then I have to pay tax on it. I don't make... So I don't think... It's not taxing the rich. It's taxing those that have worked hard.
We have to jump in. I'm so sorry, Tonya. We've got to get to the break. Up next, Tory MP Richard Graham is going to look ahead to tomorrow's autumn statement. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. It will turn sunnier for many through today as the cloud slowly clears, and it will stay dry as well. That's because we've got high pressure dominating out to the southwest, but the ridge will extend across much of the UK throughout today. There is a weather front up to the northwest, though, that's already starting to thicken cloud across northwestern parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, though, the cloud will lift through today and it will stay relatively dry. Any showers will tend to fade away across eastern areas to leave many of us with a fine autumnal day. Highs of around 11 or 12 degrees, just above average for the time of year. A slightly cooler feel after that chillier start across the north and west, though. Then through tonight, it'll stay dry still across the bulk of the UK. Across Wales and England, we could see some mist and fog patches, particularly across the far south. It'll be a chillier night here as well. A different story further north across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, that rain really starting to arrive. It will be breezy as well, and that will hold temperatures up, so a milder night to come despite the wind and rain. And then throughout Wednesday, we'll see that rain continue to persist across the bulk of Scotland. The breeze will continue to stay strong, particularly across coastal areas. A cloudier day further south, but still some sunshine to be had, and it will stay dry for many of us down here as well. Temperatures around 11 or 12 degrees once again. It'll be cooler by Friday, though. See you later.
Still to come this morning, there is a frantic search going on for 4 teenage boys who went camping in a car up Snowdon on Sunday morning, and they have not been seen since. We'll bring you the latest on that. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, November the 21st. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
One of the most recognisable faces from the COVID pandemic, the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Witty, is giving evidence at the COVID inquiry as we speak.
Tory tax cuts. Rishi Sunak says his government will cut taxes in tomorrow's autumn statement. We're going to be talking to a Tory MP saying what they should do and which taxes should be cut.
Global Britain, the UK and South Korea are set to sign a new long-term agreement covering defence and technology cooperation. This comes as the President of the Republic of Korea arrives in the UK for a state visit. We'll have the latest.
And broke Birmingham following the declaration of bankruptcy by Birmingham City Council. Residents have now started to notice real changes in their day-to-day lives. Our reporter Jack Carson will have the latest.
Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, so your very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The leader of the Hamas terror group says a deal for what he calls a truce with Israel is close to being agreed. The group's leader, who is based in Qatar, released a statement this morning, raising hopes of a pause in the fighting. Negotiations are said to be centred on how long the truce will last and details of a prisoner exchange that could see the release of Israeli hostages. Israel has not commented on the report. However, US President Joe Biden says a deal is close. The government's most senior medical advisor during the pandemic is giving evidence at the COVID inquiry. Sir Chris Witty told the inquiry that with the benefit of hindsight, the first lockdown in March 2020 was a bit too late. He said he was cautious about locking down the country in the early days of the pandemic due to its potential impact on disadvantaged people and those living alone.
One of the problems I had in thinking this through was I think some people were thinking that this was just a matter of getting through a few weeks and then we're out and then it's all fine. My view is you had to think about this over the course of the epidemic as a whole, and that was clearly going on to go on for a lot longer. Hence why we put so much emphasis, for example, on research. My view was always that you were only going to get to a situation you would not have to consider NPIs for the sake of argument once you've got medical countermeasures.
A search is underway for 4 young men who've been reported missing in the north of Wales. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Henderson and Hugo Morris haven't been accounted for since Sunday morning. They were last seen in a silver Ford Fiesta as they headed off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. North Wales Police is appealing for anyone with information to contact them. Government borrowing was higher than expected in October, reportedly due to cost of living payments and benefits. The Office for National Statistics says public sector net borrowing stood at £14.9 billion last month. That's £4.4 billion more than a year before. The Chancellor says that while the government has reduced inflation, more work is needed to achieve the Bank of England's goal of 2%. Lancashire Police has been criticised for its handling of the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. A review found failings in the way personal information about Miss Bulley's health struggles was disclosed to the press, which contributed to wild speculation. It said that non-reportable background information should have been provided to the media to help shape responsible reporting without disclosing sensitive information. Speaking at a press conference to discuss the report, Chief Constable Andy Marsh admitted the way the police released the information was needless.
One of the decisions which has arguably the most significant impact on public confidence was the release of personal information about Nicola's health. We found that due process was followed in this decision and that it was lawful, but we are in no doubt that releasing this information in the manner the constabulary did was both avoidable and unnecessary.
Tax cuts and welfare reforms are expected to be announced by the Chancellor tomorrow. Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement is expected to bring changes to benefits, which could see those with mental health or mobility problems told to look for work. Reports suggest that benefits could be cut by more than £4,000 a year for some people. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, told GB News the Prime Minister is making the right decisions for the country.
The Prime Minister and Chancellor have taken some really difficult decisions in the last year, which has meant that inflation has now halved. It's at 4.6%. That is great news for everybody at home who we know have been struggling with the cost of living. And it means now the Chancellor is focusing tomorrow on growing the economy, making sure we are increasing the amount of supply side capacity. That's the amount that we can produce in this country. And a part of that is a path to lower taxes, because we know how important that is to everybody sitting at home.
School holidays in Wales may be shortened under proposals put forward by the government. Welsh Education Minister Jeremy Miles says long summer breaks can be a strain on families, with disadvantaged students suffering from a loss of learning. A consultation opens today on altering the term calendar. It could see the summer holidays shortened with the addition of a new 2-week autumn break. The Association of Head Teachers says it's bewildered by the plan and that no evidence has been presented to show how it would benefit young people. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, on your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It is 11:06. Thank you for joining us this morning. You've been getting in touch. Fiona has said, why do we accept excuses for failures in the police, the NHS and education? These institutions are not performing for the public, and yet they have no problems impacting gender ideology and woke values. This has to be questioned. A lot of you calling for Nigel to be king of the jungle. You know you're doing something right when Anton Deck take the mickey out of you. And Peter, looking forward to the autumn statement tomorrow, he said, who do the Tories think they are kidding? Their taxation was just to fill their coffers. We've got global supply side inflation. Exactly. Higher taxation and interest rates in one economy make no difference. Where is food inflation now? Instead of slowing down the buying of non-essential items, people have struggled just to pay for essentials. Businesses are providing non-essential services. They've now closed with their staff facing unemployment. The economy is now worse than it could have been. What Tory success?
Well, let's go back to that to the autumn statement today. 106 Conservative MPs, they are part of the One Nation caucus, have unveiled a vision for what they believe will help create a fairer and more dynamic Britain. The report's called Boosting Growth.
It puts forward policies for the autumn statement and provides a framework for an electoral strategy for the Prime Minister.
Well, one of those members of that group is Richard Graham, who's the Tory MP for Gloucester. Richard Graham, good morning to you. Can you help me out here? One of the things you're calling for is rebalancing tax rates so all income is taxed the same regardless of source. That simplifies the tax system. What does it mean in effect?
Well, you'll remember so well that during the pandemic, we had a situation where people were able to apply for furlough. But what we discovered was that quite a lot of small business owners were in fact paying themselves through dividends rather than paying themselves a salary and then using dividends as a return on equity of the business. And that meant a distortion in how people were paying themselves. It was being done purely in order to pay a lower tax rate. So one way of avoiding all that and making things simpler and easier would be taxation at the same rate, whatever the source of the income.
Simpler and easier unless you pay yourself by dividend, because then you're presumably paying more tax.
Yes, but the whole point of having a small business, just like my father's small business, is that you should pay yourself a salary which rewards the work you're doing, and then dividends are a way of rewarding the return on equity, i.e. the profitability of the company, which will go up and down. You shouldn't be just using that as a means to lower tax.
But it's also an indication of how hard you are working as a business owner.
No, not necessarily, because the return...
Have we lost Richard? I think we've lost him. That's very irritating. We'll try and get him back because he's got quite some...
What is the One Nation caucus? What do they mean?
They are centrist, as opposed to the old Thatcherite right. Well, you might even say on the left. There are people like Damien Green as a member. In fact, they are on the left of the Conservative Party, but they call themselves One Nation. It's the Michael Heseltine wing of the Tory Party.
Left of the current Conservative Party.
And Michael Heseltine isn't even in the Conservative Party anymore, I don't think. We're going to talk to Chris Hope, of course, who is our political editor, who is in Downing Street, I think. Chris, this time tomorrow, I think, what time do we actually get the Chancellor on his feet?
About 12:30 tomorrow. This time tomorrow, the Cabinet will be breaking up. They end their meeting about 10:30. They'll approve what's in the autumn statement. And I think just over my shoulder, number 11 Downing Street, you'll have the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, walking out there, but he won't be holding his red box. That's, of course, for the spring budget. He'll simply be leaving behind me and going off to Prime Minister's questions, and then this big moment for him. And what they're saying to me, what we're getting very clear messages here from the Treasury, is they've got this Thatcherite view of this period of Mr Sunak as Prime Minister. They've worked on cutting inflation, as Thatcher did in the early 80s, Andrew and Bev, as you remember. And now come the tax cuts, but they're being very careful not to cut taxes to try and force up inflation, because they have now got inflation down to a level where pay rises are now beating inflation, which people will be happy with. They've got some big support today from, they borrowed less than they thought they would, 17 billion less than they thought they would earlier this year. That's what we call headroom. That gives a chance for the Chancellor to cut taxes if they want. There's talk today of the government bringing a tougher stick, less than a carrot for those on benefits, get more people who aren't working back into work. They could lose as much as £4,700 by 2025 if they don't try and find work. That's causing concern from more left-wing leaning Tory MPs like Steve McPartland. They don't want the carrot to be too strong. But I think for a lot of viewers in tomorrow, we're looking forward into what's in it for them. It looks like the state pension will go up by around 8.5%. That's the triple lock coming to force then. That's a big increase and a big boost there for people who are pensioners. And benefits could rise by 6.7%, not the 4.6%, which is the October rate. The Chancellor had a choice to choose different rates of inflation. He's choosing September, being more generous. He could have saved £3 billion by not doing that. Elsewhere, the tax cuts, the big headlines tomorrow will be about tax cuts. Maybe national insurance could come down. That's charged at 12% of earnings, 2% for the higher rate. So that could come down, and that could be quite interesting, I think, for many people as we look into the spring budget when more tax cuts might happen. So here's this chance, I think, for Mr Sunak to try and get those polls motoring back in his direction. He's still 20 points behind, stuck there for the past year. Everything he's done hasn't worked. David Cameron going back to the Cabinet hasn't worked. The small boat setback hasn't worked. He needs to do something. We'll find out what it is tomorrow.
What happens after the autumn statement? Do the tax changes have to then be voted through the Commons? And if so, does that create a challenge for the Labour Party? Will they dare to vote against them or abstain, or will they vote in favour of them?
Yeah. Well, the big question for Labour, which will be put, I think, almost certainly put by the PM and by the Chancellor tomorrow, is what would Labour do? We are looking into an election year. Would Labour support the tax cuts put forward by Mr Hunt? Now, I'm old enough to remember September last year, Andrew and Bev, when the Labour did say they would support the 1p cut in income tax, which was put forward by Kwasi Kwarteng. So, and then for a period when the Tories reversed that, Labour were still going to cut taxes, which shows how topsy-turvy the world was in Westminster this time last year. I think they will try and go with what the Tory plans are. They won't want to try and to scare the horses. They want to try and reassure Middle England that they will reward hard work with tax cuts.
Okay.
Interesting. All right, so that's Chris Hope, who is our political editor in Westminster. Of course, we will have live coverage of that autumn statement tomorrow. And I think they do have to nail down, if they've got the authority, if they can do it straight away, do it now. Why have we got to wait till April?
Well, let's go back, if we can, to Richard Graham, Conservative MP. Are you there, Richard? On that issue, thank you. Sorry, blooming technology. One of our viewers has messaged in, John, on that issue, and he said, I've voted Conservative all my life. This is the final straw that the Chancellor is considering to cut income tax, but not until the next financial year. What a buffoon. I'm done with the Conservatives. I'd rather not vote. That very much sums up the mood of a lot of our viewers this morning.
Well, we'll have to see what Jeremy Hunt announces tomorrow, but I suspect that there will be some encouraging tax cuts for business owners, whether it's 100% expensing or other means to reduce the costs of business, grow the economy, deliver more jobs. You've heard from Chris there the likely good news for both pensioners and those on benefits. So I think there will be something for everyone in this autumn statement. And I think your viewer, understandably frustrated, of course, everyone is frustrated. We'd all like to see the economy growing faster and stronger and all sorts of other things happening. But when you've got very difficult problems to deal with, they do take time to work through. Inflation is now down considerably, and I think hopefully this autumn statement will give all our supporters more reasons as to why they will prefer to vote Conservative rather than risk a huge amount of instability and no doubt more taxes with a Labour government that would inevitably borrow much more.
I think people are going to be confused watching this, Richard, because we have the autumn statement, we get these tax cuts announced tomorrow, and then we're going to have a budget in March, and presumably there are going to be more tax cuts announced. Why don't we just get the whole thing done tomorrow and bring them in immediately? If there is this headroom, £25 billion extra they found, which we haven't spent, why can't they do it straight away?
Well, you've got to give people some notice of changes. They can't just come in overnight. And the practice has always been to separate, if you like, departmental spending from some of the other aspects of the budget that will come in the spring. So I think we will get most of the story today, and then the date at which certain things happen will vary according to what they are. But, for example, changes to pensions and so on have to come in with the tax year.
What do you, as a One Nation group, particularly want to see come out of this autumn statement tomorrow, Richard?
Well, there are two or three things that we've called for, one of which is for those who are first-time buyers to be able to access their pension savings for the deposits. I think that could be an important stimulus to house buying and to young people in particular. We've also want to see a rationalisation of the VAT being charged on electric vehicle charging points, have the same rate at home as with the public spots. And then there are one or two other detailed things about second homes, which particularly affect parts of the country like the southwest, where you've got a lot of second home owners and a crowding out feeling for some of the locals who are finding house prices very expensive. So there's a sort of small selection of stuff in there, but this is all about trying to find ways of growth without always just simply asking for more money from the public purse.
Forgive me, Richard, but that sounds like tinkering round the edges with some rather niche issues there. Do you know how many young people have a pension that they could tap into to get on the property ladder?
Well, if you look at the new pension that we introduced almost a decade ago, there is a huge take-up of people of all ages available through the workplace. And it's a case of whether being able to access that in order to pay for the deposit on your first home, as well as using it later in life for a pension, is something that will be helpful. So accessing a small percentage of that for your deposit could be very helpful. These are modest ideas, I agree, but the bigger one on the 100% expensing for businesses is a big deal and could be a game changer, I think, for small and medium-sized business.
And what about VAT, the threshold on VAT for small businesses? It hasn't been raised for years, Richard. It's fallen way behind.
Well, that's probably, if you like, a benefit for some micro businesses. But if you mean that it should have gone from 85,000 upwards with inflation over time, you can make the case for that. Whether that would have quite the same effect on growth, I don't know. My younger son is a sole trader with the VAT limit that would mean that he would change into a small business, but he's not really employing anyone else at the moment. So I don't think it would have the same effect on employment.
This just getting back to this idea that young people can access their pensions, isn't the solution to young people not being able to get on the housing ladder, building more houses and making councils give more land or give more planning permission, at least, for people who've got applications in to build new houses? Because if you're a young person and you're quite proud of the fact that you've been putting money into your pension pot because you're planning for 40 years from now, you're now encouraging them to rip up that investment, which seems slightly mixed messaging about how we're meant to plan for our financial future.
Well, no, because the proposal is to be able to access 25% of the savings, which should be enough for most people around the age of between 30 and 35 to be able to pay the deposit on their first home. But that is limited to 25% of what they've saved.
It's not going to be enough.
It's staggering, isn't it, though, Richard, really, that so many people between the age of 30 to 35 don't own their own home now. When I bought my first home, Richard, back in the early 80s when I was 19, and I wasn't alone. Many people did. I mean, the Tories have really lost their way as what Mrs Thatcher famously called the property-owning democracy.
Well, if you were able to buy your first home at 19, that probably wasn't from savings or equity that you built up through your own business. That was probably bank of mum and dad. What we're looking at here is more like a situation in continental Europe where people are having to save for longer. But of course, it also gives them more flexibility in where they live when they're young, if they're moving around from workplace to workplace. So it's a bit of a mixed story, but you're absolutely right in the sense that we do need to do more to enable young people to get onto the property ladder, and that's specifically what this proposal should help with.
All right, Richard, I think we might have one more question with you. I want to know how it feels to be part of the Conservative Party at the moment. You're part of this particular One Nation caucus. You've got the other side of you've got the sort of new Conservatives with the Jacob Rees-Mogg crowd, with Miriam Cates, people who are talking quite different messages. How divided is the Conservative Party? Because that election is hurtling towards you, and it's not looking very good for you at the moment.
Listen, the Conservative Party, as we all know, has always been a very broad church. If you can have Bill Cash and Ken Clarke in the same party talking amicably with very different views on Europe for the best part of half a century, then everything is possible. People like Danny, a very good friend of mine, the idea that everyone is caricatured into one camp or another is for the fairies. We all share lots of things in common. That's why we're Conservatives. We may have different views on some aspects of policy, and that's exactly what a broad church party should be.
One more question. What are you conserving? What is the Conservative Party conserving? Family life, low taxes, house buying, business owners? I can't see anymore what you're trying hard to retain as the Conservative Party.
The reason why the Conservative Party is the most successful political party in history is precisely because we continue to adapt to circumstances as they evolve. We have to deal with the world as it is. I'm a strong believer in multicultural cohesion in a diverse city like my own constituency, Gloucester. There will be other people in the countryside who will be more focused on traditional conservation of buildings, heritage, countryside, wildlife, you name it. So everyone will have a slightly different approach according to what part of the country they live in. But the success of the Conservatives is because we adapt to deal with crises, whether they're inflation, Ukraine, pandemic, get through them and move the country forward afterwards.
OK. Appreciate your time this morning, Richard, enormously. Richard Graham there, Conservative MP.
For Gloucester.
For Gloucester.
For the record, there was no bank of mum and dad when I bought my first house at age 19. I was
Does not know how old you are?
Well, I was working on a local paper. But when I was in my sixth form, I got a job at Sainsbury's. I was flogging tickets, lottery tickets for Swindon Town Football Club, and I worked at the local greengrocer. So I'd saved some money, saved a bit when I was working on my first local paper. And you didn't need a huge deposit because the house only cost £19,000.
You didn't really understand the question,
it's a terraced house. No. So
And I don't think you understood the question about what the Conservative Party is conserving.
I don't think my family was ever the bank of mum and dad. My parents lived... I was brought up in a council house, and mum lived in it for 59 years. And she loved it too. So, still to come...
What has day-to-day life looked like for people in Birmingham since the council went bankrupt? Do you remember that? If you've been affected, email us and let us know. Another council's gone bankrupt as well now. You are with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 11:26 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, following the declaration of bankruptcy by Birmingham City Council, I'm afraid people who live there are noticing some pretty poor changes in their life because of the council's deteriorating ability to keep maintaining services.
So our reporter Jack Carson has been in Birmingham talking to the locals. Hello, Jack. How difficult has life become down there? I mean, most of us, even we've got functioning councils, notice that the streets look a bit of a mess at the moment, the bins in the parks are never emptied. Is it worse in Birmingham now?
Well, essentially, the situation here in Birmingham is that this city is very much still in this kind of limbo, because since they declared that Section 114 notice, effectively declaring themselves bankrupt over that, of course, equal pay liability of more than £700 million dating back to a Supreme Court case in 2012. Essentially, this council still has not put together a fully fledged financial plan as to how they're going to cut their costs and, of course, make up over the next 2 financial years, as it was revealed earlier this month, over £200 million. And so the commissioners, of course, of the government, Michael Gove, of course, at the Department for Levelling Up, sent the commissioners into this council to oversee, of course, the running of them financially, and every decision that they make here is now scrutinised financially. But they still haven't put together a financial plan of what exactly it is they're going to cut. Of course, statutory services are one of those things that will remain. So things like adult social care, things like waste collection will still, of course, happen, possibly maybe at a little bit less of a regular rate. But of course, it's also possibly the selling off as assets. I spoke to Jeevan Jones from Save Birmingham, who's campaigning to try and save some of the buildings from being sold off.
From our perspective, the people of Birmingham didn't cause the problems at Birmingham City Council, and therefore they shouldn't be the ones facing the consequences. Community places that people use matter a lot. They range from allotments, open spaces, parks, leisure centres, libraries, swimming pools, all kinds of things they use every day. We don't want the people of Birmingham to lose them due to decisions that they didn't make. Since we launched the campaign only a few weeks ago, we've had over 1,000 residents sign up, nominating hundreds of places. And last week we got unprecedented cross-party support for the campaign. That means that we now have the opportunity to work with the council, with the commissioners, to develop community solutions that protect our community places and maybe actually improve them too.
Yeah, so as you heard there from some of the lists that Jeevan was saying, it's things like leisure centres, parks, all of these things that maybe the community isn't necessary to a community, but it enriches a community both culturally and of course for all kinds of different things, whether it's taking your kids to the park, whether it's going to the theatre, things like this. All these assets that the council owns, there are concerns that they could be sold off in a quick fire sale to raise that £200 million that they're going to need to bridge that deficit gap over the next couple of years. And of course the news today that Nottingham could well be going bankrupt because it's got a £23 million financial gap just for this year alone. It's bad news for councils across the country.
Well, that's our
Thank you, Jack.
In Birmingham. When Jack says the council's selling off its assets, hang on, whose assets are they? Yeah. They're the people's assets. The community centres, really important part. Sports centres, really important for unemployed, keeping people healthy and
fit. A leisure centre is not a luxury item for a community. A leisure centre with a swimming pool is a vital part of keeping that local population mentally and physically well.
I wonder if they've reduced the workforce. I wonder how many of the workforce work from home.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many of the councillors have taken a reduction in pay, the opposite have taken a reduction in pay.
Just get in touch with us if you live in Birmingham.
And that is our second city.
And you're noticing, exactly, and you're noticing services being cut and the provision not being as good as it was. Right, still to come this morning. Awful story, missing teenagers. Police and no doubt the parents are frantically concerned for 4 teenagers who went missing on Sunday morning while on a Snowdonia camping trip. We'll have the latest.
And is Black Friday a scam? Yes. According to the consumer group Witty, just 2% of Black Friday bargains are really legitimate. I'm not surprised, are you?
No. That and much more after your morning's news with Sophia.
It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The government's most senior medical advisor during the pandemic is giving evidence at the COVID inquiry. Sir Chris Witty told the inquiry that with the benefit of hindsight, the first lockdown in March 2020 was a bit too late. He said he was cautious about locking down the country in the early days of the pandemic due to its potential impact on disadvantaged people and those living alone.
One of the problems I had in thinking this through was I think some people were thinking that this was just a matter of getting through a few weeks and then we're out and then it's all fine. My view is you had to think about this over the course of the epidemic as a whole, and that was clearly going to go on for a lot longer. Hence why we put so much emphasis, for example, on research. My view was always that you were only going to get to a situation you would not have to consider NPIs for the sake of argument once you've got medical countermeasures.
The leader of the Hamas terror group says a deal for what he calls a truce with Israel is close to being agreed. The group's leader, who is based in Qatar, released a statement this morning, raising hopes of a pause in the fighting. Negotiations are said to be centring on how long the truce may last and details of a prisoner exchange that could see the release of Israeli hostages. Israel has not commented on the reports. However, US President Joe Biden says a deal is close. A search is underway for 4 young men who have been reported missing in the north of Wales. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Henderson and Hugo Morris haven't been accounted for since Sunday morning. They were last seen in a silver Ford Fiesta as they headed off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. North Wales Police is appealing for anyone with information to contact them. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2534 and €1.1453. The price of gold is £1,585 and 82 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,454 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
Your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back.
It's 11:37. You're with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So you've got to be smart to be Prime Minister, right? Well, you'd hope so. Yesterday, the former Chief Scientific Advisor, Patrick Valens, relayed to the COVID inquiry about how Boris Johnson found it difficult, apparently, to understand what was going on.
Certainly when I left a meeting, I would usually be persuaded that we had got him to understand what it was we were trying to say. But as one of the extracts showed that you put up there, that 6 hours later he might not have remembered what was in that presentation.
I don't care. I don't care how intelligent Boris Johnson is.
Yeah, but he is very clever. He's got a honours degree in the classics from Oxford.
Now,
He just
Tonya
doesn't
and
have a
Nigel here,
scientific
but I think
head.
we've got to break this up, guys, unfortunately. We're just about to start having a party here. We're expecting a royal arrival at the Mall any moment now. There are King Charles and Queen Camilla. That is the Mall outside Buckingham Palace. This is because there's a visit by the President of South Korea.
And on a state visit, you will see the flag of the country. The national flag will be flying, the South Korean flag. So that's the King and Queen arriving at Buckingham Palace because the President of South Korea, who's here on a state visit, the first one for the King here since the coronation. They are going to sign a trade deal later today. That is the point of it, really. Kemi Badenoch's going to sign the trade deal. We did talk to the Trade Minister, didn't we, Guy Hands, and tried to get him to put a figure on what it was worth, the trade deal, and he said it was going to be about data
Greg
sharing.
Hands, he was very excited about... There's David Cameron going into our new Foreign Secretary.
Because, of course, he'll be on parade. There'll be a number of very senior cabinet ministers will be involved. There'll be a state banquet tonight at Buckingham Palace. It's always a grand affair, and they get out the best crockery for that.
I bet they do.
Very smart.
So that's the President of South Korea, His Excellency Yoon Suk-yeol, accompanied by his wife, Mrs Kim Keon-hee, and they are expected to arrive for a state visit any minute now.
Yeah. Tonya.
Right, shall we go back to what we were discussing about the COVID inquiry, Tonya?
Yes, I mean, I don't... You know, I shake when we start discussing the COVID inquiry. I mean, when I speak to people like Nigel, who still think that lockdowns did anything apart from harm, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. You know, talking about intelligent people, you were just saying, Boris is intelligent, he got first in his classics degree, but whatever. It shows you that really intelligent people have become mind-numbingly stupid just to hold on to their politics and their ideas when we see that there is no way that lockdowns were good for us. They were so bad. I mean, we had... It's funny, because I was just watching a clip of Valens on the BBC 10 days before we locked down, talking about the fact that this is a virus, you know, we just need to protect those that are elderly.
Mild flu-like symptoms.
Mild flu-like symptoms. We need to, you know, get herd immunity in the young and just look after the old, and off we go. 10 days later, it was an about turn. What was that about? Why did that happen?
And
because what was happening in other countries? Don't you think that's what it was? Me too, because in Italy was locking down, other countries, so they panicked.
Yeah.
That's what I think happened.
Well, but how dare these intelligent people panic? How dare they?
What Patrick Vallance said yesterday was that the lockdown should have taken place a week earlier.
Oh, rubbish, Nigel. That would have made a not blind bit of difference.
Which was the feeling at the time. And the French...
Feeling from the Chinese Communist Party.
Exactly.
Well, from the French, actually, because I mean, the French locked down a week earlier.
Because of the Chinese Communist Party?
Yes.
Well, I don't think because of that, because infections were then doubling every 3 days, and they're in...
Yes, infections, and we know that the recording of these infections and everything was really skew-whiff. It made no difference. It wasn't people dying, and that was not true.
Yeah, but the point was the only interventions we had at that time were lockdown, social distancing, and masks. Masks, obviously, arguably, whether they did any good or good at all.
But let's be truthful. If we didn't have social media and we hadn't have gone for this phase, would we have even noticed? We've had bad flus before, and all that happened was that people...
Well, yes, we would.
Die of flu,
230,000 people...
No, that figure is not correct.
230,000 people had COVID on their death certificates.
Yes,
with
COVID. My mother-in-law, who died of cancer, they tried to put COVID on her death certificate.
But 7 in 10 of
we know
those
there's lots of lies going on there.
Had it as an underlying cause, which means it was the main cause of death for the majority of those people.
I can give you the actual ONS statistics on that. As you know, Nigel Nelson, this is an area in which I have spent a huge amount of time being a complete girly swat. Only 0.4% of COVID deaths were listed as having COVID as their only code on their death certificate. The ONS own assessment is that in summer 2020, 16,000 excess deaths were non-COVID, 18 to 21,000 excess deaths were COVID. There's been hundreds of meta-analyses now that prove that the idiocy and the non-scientific logic behind locking people up means it must never happen again. This inquiry, what is so frustrating, is that they aren't even discussing whether lockdowns should ever have happened in the first place.
That's the main thing, is why aren't they asking Valance, was the response justified in the first place?
Well, I mean,
that's what we need to understand.
Chris Witty, we know today, will be saying that we shouldn't have locked down anything like as soon as we did.
That's right.
At all.
I mean, the scientists didn't actually always agree with each other. They're a bit like economists or politicians.
He was worried about the impact on our mental health and especially on kids.
But everybody had a different kind of function there. So Chris Whitty's function was the overall health of the public.
Yeah.
So he was taking into account all those other things. You know, what will be the effect on as Tonya mentions, cancer patients,
mental health,
and so on. Rishi Sunak was concerned about the economy.
Quite right.
Was
Clearly not enough.
was not concerned about health. The health secretary was concerned about decent figures for him. I mean, it obviously just depends on where you are and what your responsibilities are. But
is it relevant that Patrick Vallance had £600,000 worth of shares in GlaxoSmithKline and then was put head of the vaccine task force?
I think I think it's irrelevant. Yeah.
Why aren't they asking him?
Well, they may well do.
They haven't.
But have you seen
at a future occasion?
It was raised, but they didn't challenge him as to whether it was appropriate.
It was taken as credibility. They're taking these positions when these contributors to this COVID inquiry are asked to set out who they are. They take a fact like I was a shareholder in Glaxo. Oh, that's really nice. Thank you, Mr. Vallance, for that detail. Where is your follow-up question? Did that affect your decision to lock people up, to recommend lockdown because the solution to lockdown was going to be a jab in your arm and you had a vested interest? Why aren't they asking those questions now?
We go back to actually the timeline that when we first locked down, there was no jab in the arm. We didn't know at that point how long it would take to develop a vaccine.
But let's be honest. We've know what's happened and we're moving forward now. So if lockdowns were necessary, why is Sweden not a tomb? You know, why not just a graveyard where they didn't lock down? Why we need to go back to the reasons of why they locked down.
Well, that's the point
why
of the
did the
inquiry.
power go to the head? We know now things like rule of six were straight up nonsense.
Oh yeah.
So they
complete nonsense. Yes,
so they
absolutely.
should be on trial.
And the tier system was nonsense.
They should be on trial for frightening the nation. The damage that they did psychologically to the nation. Never mind about what the lockdowns did, but this fear mongering, this excess fear. Was that coffee worth it when you go out for a coffee? They should be on trial for that.
Well, but regardless of whether they should be on trial, the point of the inquiry is so we don't make the same mistakes over again.
But they're not asking the right questions to stop that from happening.
Well, yeah, but if the question is over lockdown, there was nothing else in our armoury at the time to actually deal with it.
No, we didn't. But this didn't deal with it,
Lockdowns have been going on since the Black Death 700 years ago. During the Black Death, they did it.
Not of health.
Because people were dropping dead.
Black Death? Are we seriously saying that our health strategy should be based on something from medieval England?
It shows how little things have developed. So we were still stuck with the same kind of mitigations they had in medieval times. They covered themselves up. They socially distanced. They didn't call
Nigel,
it those
during
things
that
then,
period,
but they did.
But during that period, people were dropping down dead in the streets. That was not happening with COVID.
They were
fear-mongering.
collecting the dead in wheelbarrows, if you remember.
Thank you.
During the
Black Death. During the Black Death. So during COVID, that wasn't happening. It was a fear-mongering group. It was completely wrong, and the questions are not being asked in order to make sure this never happens again.
We didn't know at that stage how serious it might be. Number 10 were doing things like working out where to put mass graves. They were thinking about could they hire ice rigs as morgues, because they didn't know.
On false modelling.
In those early days, nobody actually knew what we were facing.
So why were we making such a drastic decisions? Why were we putting things like we need mass morgues? Why?
But because we might have done.
No, we
Based on who? Based on what the Chinese Communist Party want to do to bring down the West. If you think about that,
based on a virus we didn't understand, we didn't know how serious it was. We knew people were dying. We didn't know how many. We had the Imperial College report that said.
We are not actually going to take on Imperial College modelling. We are not. We are not. Because everything they say is completely wrong. It's fear-mongering modelling. Nigel, we had a pandemic response.
It's a warning of what might
had been doing for a decade. We looked at our pandemic response. This is what we'll do if we have a pandemic, and they tore it up and threw it out the window. And we are suffering the consequences because of that. The people that tore up our pandemic response that we had studied, we had brilliant minds studying, deciding how we do this, was thrown away. The people that decided to throw that away need to be on trial.
Would you put them on a criminal trial?
Yes, I would. Absolutely, I would.
They would say they were doing their job.
Yes, I think, and I think they were. And I'm not suggesting that mistakes weren't made. Mistakes were made not just by the politicians, but by the scientists too. Eat Out to Help Out was completely mad.
But that wasn't so mad. Why was that mad?
Why was it mad?
Yeah.
OK, well, I mean, I did actually go out for an Eat Out to Help Out, but I had one meal because the whole thing was so uncomfortable.
But that's
it was quite clearly a disease spreader to sit in a restaurant with a load of other people when
it's an airborne virus. It was always going to spread. Whatever happened, nothing we did was going to change that.
That's why Eat Out to Help Out was actually ridiculous, to make people go outside and go and catch the disease.
Just forget about that. The first lockdown, you're picking on things because you know that you're wrong, Nigel. The real thing is that lockdowns were completely incorrect. They were not the way to deal with this particular virus, which didn't hurt the young. You don't lock down healthy people. You care for people that have a virus and you guard guard them, but you don't lock inside their homes healthy people that this is not going to harm. That was the mistake.
There are two fundamental issues, and once you understand those, we understand why it was an overreaction and why you didn't need to be frightened sat with your family. And it kind of breaks my heart thinking about you going out for your burger to help the nation and then being frightened. You were never at any significant risk of dying from COVID-19, and neither were your family.
Well, I mean, I don't know. All I do know is...
Well, I do know. I do know.
And
I could have given you the figures then, and I can give you them now, because what was the average age of death?
I know the average age of death was elderly.
82. What was it?
It was 80-something.
83. It was higher than average life expectancy.
Yeah.
And so this was always predominantly a virus that was affecting the elderly.
It was, but it wasn't just old people who were being affected. And once again, I go back to, we did not know at that stage what it might do.
Nigel, but we did.
Look, we knew. Yeah. And the infection fatality rate, I mean, they were talking in the COVID inquiry about the fact that they thought the infection fatality rate was going to be 4%. That's where Neil Ferguson got his 500,000 are going to be dead in 6 months from the Imperial College, who have a vested financial interest to come up with those sorts of figures. And it wasn't the infection fatality rate for the vast majority of people was less than 0.1%. So it was proven now, over 70, it was slightly more, potentially more lethal than flu at that time.
But, you and Tonya seem to think that it's actually rather like flu or a bad cold or something like that.
It is.
And it wasn't for the people who ended up on ventilators.
And what killed them was...
Can I give you an example of that? People that don't have peanut allergies, OK, do not die of peanuts. So the whole point is that there were certain people, a small group of people, the very elderly, the morbidly obese. These are the people that we had to protect and need to be protected from COVID. But the rest of the population did not need to worry. We're not going to get rid of peanut butter because there's a few people who can't eat peanut butter because they're going to die from it. And that's the point. That's the example that was taken, and it's blown out of proportion.
One of the people say one of the reasons Boris Johnson got so sick, wasn't he 17 stone when he was taken?
Yes, I mean...
And he's smaller than me.
Yeah.
He's not a very tall man.
He's not a tall man.
So lifestyle.
Hugely overweight, which is why he almost was on a ventilator.
Yeah, but I mean, there's somebody who wasn't in his 80s.
Yeah, but massively overweight.
But an awful lot of people had other health conditions which meant they were under threat. And I think that the reason the nation actually went along with the restrictions that were imposed on us is they did appear to make sense. And
no, Nigel, because they were frightened witless by the psychops that were done upon us.
But there was this feeling that...
anxiety syndrome.
OK, that makes sense. There were certain things that didn't. I mentioned the tier system. That made no sense whatsoever. The rule of 6 made no sense whatsoever. When it came down to lockdown, social distancing...
What was the 10 p.m? I can't even remember that.
The pubs had to close at 10 o'clock.
Restaurant and pubs, everyone had to come out at the same time at 10 p.m. and leave.
Everybody was all
so everyone was
forced together.
So is that not an exact sign of kind of men letting power go to their head have gone crazy?
And the rule of 6, I'd forgotten about the rule of 6. People just forget.
Yeah.
Quickly we forget.
I don't forget. I remember every single one of them.
And also don't forget that very first wave, the vast majority of the deaths, over 50% of deaths, if not... I think that first wave is about 70, correct me if I'm wrong, and they were in care homes, those deaths.
Well,
and there we have a conversation about whether that was the treatments that were administered under panicking environments and treatments were given to elderly.
No, they went to care homes untested. That was a Matt Hancock mistake, which would have killed between 20 and 40,000 people because they were untested coming out of hospital and then put into care homes where COVID spread.
And the treatments that they were given in those... There are huge questions to be asked about the treatments that were given to the elderly in those care homes in that initial phase as well.
Well, you two. Quite a conversation that was.
Baroness Hallett, you're out of a job. Me and Tonya are in the chair.
Oh, God, I love that.
Right.
Next story. What else are we going to talk about?
Foreign aid.
Oh, right. David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, says he's going to put foreign aid at the centre of government. We do not want it going back up, Nigel.
Well, I do.
Well, I don't. Charity begins at home during a cost of living crisis.
I do think that... I think that we do have an international responsibility.
We're already giving far more than even America does.
We're giving
0.5%
at the moment. David Cameron, in his day, it was 0.7%. He'll go along with the current figure. It's about 12 billion. He will go along with the current figure because he accepts collective responsibility, but he would like to see it go up.
Well, yeah, I hope he doesn't get his way.
Well, OK. I mean, it just depends whether we think we have a responsibility to the rest of the world.
We do. We're giving billions a year already.
I know.
And we know, Nigel, in one particular year, there was £1 billion unspent in the budget, and they were running around the world dishing it out like Smarties. Appalling when we've got people living in fuel poverty
we were giving
people who can't
12 billion a year.
Their houses.
If we just go back to COVID, Rishi Sunak spent 400 billion during the COVID period. It shows that money is actually there.
It's not, though, is it?
Well, we're paying the price for that now.
We printed money and we're paying the price for it now.
Yeah. Don't you think during a cost of living crisis, we shouldn't raise international aid?
Not only do I think we shouldn't be raising international aid, I think we should be reducing it, because British people are suffering at the moment.
They are.
And therefore we should be looking at reducing it, not making it greater.
It's their taxes we're giving to countries which often squander it and waste it.